You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian here with my co-host, Matt. We are coming to you on November 16th of 2021. Got a lot to cover on today's episode. We've had some pretty big free agents sign already. We've had a big extension happen this morning. Some rumors going around the hot stove. Had the Mets finally hire their general manager, and then we'll hit on some of the awards winners that have happened in the past couple days, and look forward to the Cy Young and MVP voting or awards that are going to be announced in the next couple days. But before we get into all that, how are you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great. Just been watching some sports, following the free agency baseball. Had a good weekend. I was out of town. Was down in Auburn at the disaster of a football game they played, but it was still fun to be down there and all. And yeah, I've been doing good. How about yourself?
Yeah, I've been doing pretty good as well. Just hanging out, watching some college football. It's getting late in the season for that, and then just paying attention to this free agency market so far. It's been one of the faster paced ones we've had in the last couple of years. So that's been pretty interesting. But we'll talk a little bit of why that is in just a little bit. But let's go ahead and jump in to our first signing that we had, and this was Eduardo Rodriguez. Signing a 5-year, $78 million deal with the Detroit Tigers that has an opt-out after 2 years.
Yeah, I really, really, really like this signing, and I like Eduardo Rodriguez a lot. He's a guy that um, in his career, he's coming up since 2015, has gotten better every year. In fact, his wins above replacement totals have increased every year. Um, in 2015, he first came up. He actually put up 1.8 that year. Then the very next year, put up 1.2. But since then, he's been above a 2 WAR starter every single season. He has a very good changeup when it's own. His strikeout rates have been really nice, all above 9.5 for last 4 years. This past year at 10.56 was a career high. Career low walks this year. Um, and really the thing that bit him was bad luck. He was one of the best starters in the league by FIP and by the metrics. His expected ERA numbers even were at a 3.55, but playing in front of a very we'll just say questionable defense in Boston. And playing in Fenway Park as well, which is, for some guys can be a really tough to pitch in with the Green Monster, and depending on what style of pitcher you are, um, it was a little bit of a struggle, but put up 157 innings coming off of 2020, which he missed completely due to myocarditis that was brought on by COVID. So very good to see him back. He actually only had a 4.74 ERA this year, which wasn't great, but this is a guy who his stuff is there, the metrics are there, and could be a very under the radar type signing. And I think his best seasons are yet to come.
Yeah, Eduardo Rodriguez, he's been a really good starter, like you said, throughout his career. And a lot of people will look at that ERA and say, well, he's 4.74 this year and, a 4.16 on his career. But I mean, if you look at, his FIP, this year was a 3.32, and that plays to the terrible defense like you were talking about. And his xFIP was a 3.43 this year. So he's legitimately really good. And he's been somebody who's flown under the radar on that Boston rotation for many years because they've had, guys like Chris Sale and Nathan Eovaldi pitch even better than he has, above him in that rotation. But it's a really good signing for the Tigers, a young rotation that could use, some veteran stability in Eduardo Rodriguez. And another thing I noticed was that they only have like 2 right-handed starters. And a lot of their young guys are lefties outside of like Casey Mize. So maybe Eduardo Rodriguez will be that kind of veteran lefty that can teach those younger guys, how to pitch or pitch types or how to shape stuff. It could be a really, really good signing to help develop those younger pitchers, from how Eduardo Rodriguez has developed over his career, learning from a guy like Chris Sale before.
Yeah, and you mentioned that too, and the fact that this is a very not super crazy contract. 5 years, $78 million. That's nothing that, if it doesn't go perfectly, will handicap you in the future. It's a contract that, I mean, it doesn't take. He could be a mid-rotation innings leader and not really improve at all from where he's at, maybe not even be quite as good as he's been, and is still probably not a bad contract. So definitely something that you like to see from the Tigers. A good start to their free agent, class this year, which as has been talked about a lot, the Tigers are going to be really active, and this is a great start for it. Get the ball rolling, pick up a really good player, and not really handicap yourself on the ability to possibly pick up some of these really high priced free agents later on that have been rumored to want to go there. So definitely a very good signing and a good start for Detroit this offseason.
Yeah, it really is. And Detroit, they surprised a lot of people this year with some of that young talent kind of finally coming up. I mean, Tori Skubal found his way a little bit. Casey Mize found his way. And like they have been very aggressive in free agency before, but it seems like they're coming back on that, that kind of train again after a couple years of sitting out. They could have a really good offseason and put themselves right into contention in that division in the AL Central, which, we've seen like the Twins maybe start wanting to reset a little bit. The Indians already resetting or Guardians, sorry, that as official
That's not
as
going to
of
change for at least a year or two.
yeah,
For
yeah,
us,
yeah.
we're gonna keep doing it on accident.
Well, did you see the part where they like halted all merchandise sales that was supposed to happen because like there's a roller derby team in Cleveland that is called the
Yeah,
Guardians?
I saw that,
They
and they
finally
they
they
sued them and
finally
they settled, but
Yeah, they
it's
finally
funny.
settled today, but it's anyways, that's going to take us a little while to get used to, but with them the Guardians resetting as well, the White Sox are the primary team in there. So if the Tigers have a big offseason here, maybe sign one of those high priced shortstops. There's an interest in Carlos Correa, maybe even Trevor Story. And there's still talks about maybe another starting pitcher. I mean, they could vault themselves right into a wild card spot, or maybe even for that division if the White Sox don't be careful.
Yeah, this is really going to help the Tigers. They're going to have to do a lot more to get into contention for the division over the White Sox. But I will say that I think that a couple more moves, like even without, I think they're going to need the Correa plus depth type thing.
Right.
So Correa plus another pretty high level starter plus some really good kind of under the radar type guys for them to become a real contender in the division. But from what I can tell right now, I mean, this looks like a team that could probably compete for the wild card with if they bring in a Correa maybe, or something like that. So, depending on how the young talent does, I don't know if they'll be deep enough really, because I think I have a really high opinion of the White Sox still, going into next year. So it's gonna be tough to catch them. But I do like this start for the Detroit, and this feels a little bit like the Padres a couple years ago, where the real move is trying to go like 2 years from now type thing. They're gonna make these signings while they can, and let them kind of be there, get some success going at the major league level, and get the get the success going with get those younger guys in with people who have been successful before, and then really the big the big seasons that they're looking for, like World Series contention, being 2 years from now probably. So but I do like this move.
Yeah, really interesting start to the Tigers offseason. So we'll see what they continue to do. But let's go ahead and move on to our next one. This is probably the most shocking thing that we're going to have on this episode this week, but that's Noah Syndergaard signs a 1 year $21 million deal with the Angels pending his physical.
Yeah, so this is a really 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 interesting move. And I think there's a lot to be said about this one. I can't decide whether I like it or not, and I don't think anybody's gonna know how this move's gonna go until, I mean, or even have an idea until we see how Syndergaard looks in spring training. Because I mean, he hadn't pitched in 2 years really. He came back and pitched like 2 innings this year just to get him back out there after all the work he did to rehab and be ready. But he's dealt with not just the Tommy John surgery, which is obviously a big deal, but other injuries too. So it's going to depend on how healthy Noah Syndergaard is, and how much he gets his stuff back. So I think in a vacuum, I think for the Angels this is a great deal because his upside as a starter is the ace the Angels desperately need. I mean, if he comes back 100%, you're really getting a bargain at $20 million for him, and this is an immediate way to improve. And if the Angels, if it fails and he's not he doesn't come back 100%, then you're only paying for 1 year, so your books will be back open again next year. So I look at this as a pretty good move for the Angels. You know, Noah Syndergaard is, I mean, like we said, just a stud pitcher. I mean, guy who, for a little while before the injuries started to pile up, was really had an argument as being maybe the best pitcher in baseball. 2016 pitched 183 innings, put up 6 wins above replacement, a 2.60 ERA. High strikeout rates, doesn't walk many guys. I mean, and he's got a rare blend of velocity and control that very few people have. So, if he comes back and is healthy next year, um, I mean, you could see him be, you could see this be a move that really helps the Angels. But if not, then it's a 1 year deal, and you can just move on after.
Yeah, I think the only weird part is that it was because he has the qualifying offer, so you're giving up a draft pick to sign him to a 1 year deal, and that's very, very rare to see, especially with somebody who like it. Why I said so much pending the physical, which all these deals are really pending physicals, um, is because Syndergaard made sure to do this. He made his decision on Monday, so he can go and take the physical today and get the results on Wednesday before the qualifying offer deadline happens. So if he fails that physical, he can easily take that qualifying offer for the 18.4 million from the Mets, have the try to pitch there this year and then come back with next year with no draft pick compensation if he does pick well or pitch well. He can still do that with the Angels. It's just it's weird for them to sign a pitcher who is has the qualifying offer attached to them and be willing to give up a pick for somebody that you're only signing for 1 year, and it could be a risk because you don't know what he quite is. You mentioned he came back and pitched, I think it was 2 innings this year. He threw like
Yeah.
25 pitches, but he didn't throw a breaking ball. He threw only fastballs. I think it was like 25 pitches is what he threw, and all of them were fastballs. So you really don't know how he's going to respond to a game situation with his breaking pitches. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Syndergaard has, and what if the Angels see something, maybe in the middle of the year they try to talk an extension or something to lock him up longer term. But it did seem like plenty of teams are interested in him at that 1 year deal. I mean, from reports, he had three offers at 1 for 21, and then another offer at 1 for 25. So it is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and one thing about the qualifying offer is that this signifies one of two things to me. Number one is I think Razel Iglesias got a qualifying offer, so regardless of whether or not you sign, if you lose Iglesias and sign Syndergaard, you get that draft pick back. It's not quite as high of a draft pick, but you still get one back. And the other thing too is that the Angels might add more than just Syndergaard. I mean, they got a lot of money coming off the books this year, and I mean, they could very well be in the market for like a Marcus Stroman or a Kevin Gossman or somebody. So I don't think this is the last move we hear about from the Angels, because one of those two guys would be a really really nice addition for the Angels, and really give them some rotation depth behind Otani. And then they've got a couple of young guys who will maybe step up, like a Detmers, who's a guy that is a real high rated prospect that just came up this past year. I think you could really see some good stuff there in their rotation going forward. Um, if they can maybe add one more guy through free agency, or maybe even a trade too, but primarily I think through free agency with the money that they have to spend. So it's gonna be very interesting to see what the Angels do going forward. But definitely this was a very interesting signing, and I think that this is one that could really go either way.
It really could. And like you said, if they can build some, if Syndergaard is back and Otani pitches the way he pitched this year, we know they have, a good offense once Mike Trout gets healthy, once Anthony Rendon gets healthy, with Jared Walsh breaking out this year, with David Fletcher being a solid bat. And then, whatever you can get from the rest of those guys, your issue was pitching. If you can get Otani, you get Syndergaard. If you can get another guy, maybe that a lower tier 2 or 3 option behind those two, you could set yourself up for a playoff run even. I mean, the Angels were a team we liked really, a lot last year, and that we just said their big thing was pitching. So if they can figure that out and sign another guy, then be interesting to see what kind of what kind of what am I trying to say? Jesus, I'm stumbling all over myself.
Stumbling like the Mets GM search.
Yeah, I mean, geez, that's we'll get to that here in a minute, but it'll be interesting to see what kind of noise they could make in that division. Is what I was trying to say. But
Yeah, no
anyways,
doubt.
let's go ahead and move on. We'll go ahead and move to Jose Berrios. You know, we had just been traded last year from the Twins to the Blue Jays at the deadline. He ends up signing a 7-year, $131 million extension with Toronto with an opt-out after the 5th year. There are some escalators in that, which we don't quite know what those are exactly, but he also gets a limited no-trade clause.
Yeah, so Jose Berrios is a pretty good pitcher. We've seen him be primarily his biggest strength has been his durability. 2018, 192 innings, 2019, 200 innings. Last year was obviously the shortened season, but he was one of the higher up in the league in innings in the shortened season. And then this year, 192 innings again. So this is a guy who's thrown a lot of innings, and he actually really had his best career season this year. Everyone's always liked his stuff, but a 347 FIP, 352 ERA, strikeout rate, second highest of his career, and that's just to the 2020 shortened season. His walks were the lowest in his career. Getting ground balls at the best clip of his career. He did a very good job this year. This is a guy with a fantastic breaking ball. And he's somebody who, maybe a little bit like Eduardo Rodriguez, maybe the best that's yet to come with him. And they lock him up. Now his overall numbers, you know, he's an over 4 ERA guy. So far in his career, he's really been a mid rotation starter. Probably a number 3 throughout his career. He's not really an ace at this stage. So I mean, he probably doesn't have quite the upside of, even of a Noah Syndergaard maybe, or somebody like that, or maybe you look at Marcus Stroman or even Eduardo Rodriguez as having a tiny bit more upside. But he's a guy that obviously the Blue Jays really like. They gave up a lot for him, and you know now we know why they give up so much for him. They really like him, and they think he's going to be part of their future. They were able to get him an extension under what I feel like could be a pretty team friendly deal. 7 years, 131 million. If he hits his, if he really does hit his stride over the next few years, that could end up being a pretty good deal. And he's also young still. He's 27, so that deal will only go through, I believe, his age 34 season.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not a very old pitcher, at 34. I mean, he probably won't be completely useless at the end of that deal. So that's one of the things you maybe see from some of these long-term pitcher deals where they're going to be really good for a couple years most likely, but by the end of the deal they're probably useless. That's not going to be the case here. So, or at least it could be, but it's not as likely. So, I think the Blue Jays probably just locked up a number 2, number 3 starter for the next 7 years on a fairly relatively cheap deal. Not a super cheap deal, but not too bad. So, um, I like what they did here, and I think we've talked about before that they were going to emphasize pitching, and they re-signed one of their guys from this year that's done well. So I think it's a very good sign for them.
Yeah, on a deal like you said, it's not too terrible, money wise. It's $18 million a year for the type of production that you're going to get out of him. It's pretty like reasonable. And then, once you look at the way that the market's looking right now, where the top pitchers on the market are, looking for 30 million plus per year, and you got just locked up a guy who is really solid. And even after he got traded to Toronto, he even unlocked a little bit of another gear. The ERA doesn't look so great, but if you look at his FIP, I mean, his FIP was a 328 when he went to Toronto. In his how many games? In 12 games, it was a 328. His walk rate was the lowest at any point. I mean, it is a small sample size, but it was a marginal gap that he can have. His strikeout rate even ticked up more than it's ever been in his career. So it could be something that, maybe they found just a little something else, and, maybe one of his pitches, one of his, the way his delivery, or just something that, maybe he can unlock that other level. Cause I think he could be a high 2, maybe a high 3, high 2 guy in a rotation, and then you get another, ace level guy, and you'll go on like that. But I mean, at $18 million, I mean, that's kind of what you would expect for a number two guy in a rotation. They still have Hyun-Jin Ryu, who's making 20 million right now, who's their ace. And if they want to re-sign Robbie Ray, that's going to cost them. I mean, it's going to cost them more than Berrios or more than Ryu to re-sign Ray right now. I mean, you're probably looking at 25-ish a year to get Robbie Ray back. So, it's a really good deal, I think, for Berrios. Like you said, locks him up through age 34 season. He's not going to be totally useless. And it's a good price for the Blue Jays that they don't have to really worry about, this contract's going to hurt us too bad, year in, year out to the luxury tax.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a pretty decent deal and really on both sides. So
yeah, it really is. Well, we had another smaller move happen, and that's Manny Pena signs a 2-year, $8 million deal with the Atlanta Braves.
yeah, so Manny Pena is a guy who I think this is a pretty nice signing for the Braves because if you remember this past year, part of their struggles during the regular season for a while were due to a lack of production at the catcher position after Travis d'Arnaud went down with injury. And Travis d'Arnaud is a 30 plus year old, I think he's 33 or 34-year-old catcher. And he's dealt with the injury. He's also not a fantastic defensive catcher. And when he went down, the Braves either had to bring in a rookie who really wasn't ready, especially for defensively playing catcher in the big leagues, or just a hodgepodge of veterans that were either just not good at all anymore, or were just basically AAA players thrown into the major league level. Like, I mean, the list of catchers the Braves had this year included Stephen Vogt, Jonathan Lucroy, Kevin Smith. I mean, it was not pretty, and I think that Jeff Mathis was another one, and I think that you look at the Braves and the ability to have a little bit more depth at the catcher position is really important. And Manny Pena is a guy who he's a very good defender as a catcher. Um, Not a great offensive player, but he does have some things that make you believe a little bit offensively. He's not just a terrible hitter. Um, this year he hit 13 home runs. He only hit 189, but he actually had a 162 BABIP. His plate discipline numbers were the best of his career this year, so that was pretty encouraging to see. And this is not really a guy you expect to be some kind of star hitter or anything, but if he can be an okay hitter and be a good defensive catcher to back up Travis d'Arnaud, if when Travis d'Arnaud needs a day off, be able to do that and be successful as a guy to fill in when if Travis d'Arnaud gets hurt, be able to handle everyday duties for a little while, um, and also help with the pitching staff, which does include still some young pitchers. You still got a young Ian Anderson in there. You've got a few AAA guys who have been up and down from back and forth to the big leagues. This is a veteran catcher, and the presence should help too. So I definitely think Manny Pena was a pretty good signing for the Braves. It's real cheap. I mean, it's 2 years, $8 million. So you're not really going to give up too much money with that, and I like it.
Yeah, $4 million for a really good defensive backup catcher, who's not a totally useless at the plate. I mean, his career WRC plus is 91. I mean, there's some catchers that wouldn't even hit that as a starting catcher, at some places. But it's a really solid deal, like you said. Really good defender that can come in, and you're not losing much. You're gaining a lot defensively, and you're not losing much offensively. And maybe they can do something with like how the Giants did and give d'Arnaud a couple extra days off here or there just to kind of keep him fresh a little bit more, and maybe stay away from those injuries as much. So a really good deal, really solid deal, and relatively cheap for a backup catcher. So, but let's go ahead and we'll just note one thing that we has been said since the last episode, and it's about how the free agent market is, how it's actually moving a little bit faster this year just because of the potential of that lockout, and some players want to get their deals in place so they don't even have to worry about how long that extends, and then maybe having to sign a deal in February and not being able to find housing and all that. But two players that were mentioned, two high profile players that were mentioned that the markets are moving pretty fast on and that could sign before the December 1st deadline are Corey Seager and Marcus Semien.
Yeah, so both of those guys, obviously are going to be two of the more prized free agents. Marcus Simeon is a MVP finalist, so he's not. I'm highly doubt he wins because Otani's in there, but tomorrow that'll be announced tomorrow night. But he's he's a great shortstop and or potentially second baseman or whatever they want to play him at on the infield, and he's a guy that I think is good deal. And Corey Seager, same thing. I mean, very good player, and I think it's a good thing these guys are gonna for these guys to sign pretty fast. I think that sometimes teams or players wait too long to sign because they want to be that last guy on the market, and that desperation kind of sets in for teams as, oh, we got to, if we're going to sign somebody, we got to sign this guy type thing. And that hadn't worked out especially well. I mean, a lot of players have gotten stuck and been getting closer to the season and not even having a deal at all. I mean, you look at last year, Yasiel Puig didn't have a deal going into the season, and he hadn't played in the big leagues again. You look at I think there was also something else that happened after that I don't recall exactly what happened. It might have been some kind of legal thing with him, but um, you have Craig Kimbrell did this a couple years ago where he kind of got stuck. He was best reliever on the market. He kind of got stuck, and he ended up not signing until midseason, and it really cost him a year and a half of good baseball by doing that. And then you look at even guys like Bryce Harper, he waited a long time to sign. He signed like I think it was during spring training, and his first year with the Phillies was not all that good. And you see now he's really regained his MVP form, but it's been that's been kind of tough for some of these players that have waited too long and they've struggled at times. So I think it'll be a good thing for Seager or Simeon to go ahead and make their move. And I think teams would be wise to go ahead and shore up too before the uh, before the whole CBA stuff goes down. So they kind of know what they got for next year. They get everything kind of set up pretty well. So um, the last thing I'd want is to be in limbo, 3 weeks before the season when they say, oh yeah, the CBA is resolved now. So on either side. So I think this is a good thing.
Yeah, and especially, those two players in particular being a part of that big shortstop market, really wanting to kind of jump that market and kind of set the tone for it. You're going to have guys like Correa and Story who are probably waiting longer, to see where these people go and what teams will, have a fallback option and kind of go to them and say, all right, well, give me the biggest money now and start their contract talks at whatever these guys get. Story's probably going to be tried to get a deal more in line with what Simeon does and beat him. And then Correa, is going to want a deal bigger than Seager's. So they're, for these guys to kind of jump the market before the whole thing and, avoid that lockout and then, maybe push those guys to, wait. And then after then maybe they have to deal with the lockout as well, because they want to get the biggest money, they can get over these guys. It there's a slippery slope. And like you said, it's cost a lot of players, as of recently, with trying to wait too long. And I just think with this whole lockout thing, there's been a lot of rumors about how it's probably the worst that it's been in 20 years, 30 years with baseball. And that, it could go into a lengthy delay here and maybe even push back the start of the season. I think that could push a lot of people to want to get a deal done before that deadline. So it's going to be really interesting to see, not only these people, but what are the names that we're not quite hearing yet that a deal can come together really fast. We didn't hear much about Eduardo Rodriguez's deal or, him even being any interest in him until the night before. I mean, there was one, I think it was John Heyman the night before said that talks with Eduardo Rodriguez are heating up. I went to bed and then I woke up and he had a deal with the Tigers the next morning. And it was just like that fast. Usually you hear, hey, it's heating up and, look for him to sign in the next week. But maybe you see these deals start happening a lot faster and people are signing, really quick and you're not being able to hear as many rumors per se. And the deals are just coming together a lot, really fast for them before that deadline. So it's going to be interesting to see as we lead up with, I think, just a couple of weeks before that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think some other guys that could maybe go pretty quick. I think the way that the Braves operate, I think there's a chance that Freddie Freeman randomly gets his extension. Like they seems like it's very difficult for people to get info from the Braves front office. They're very secretive. I think that's a team. I think you could see obviously these two guys. I could see maybe like a Kevin Gossman or somebody get signed. Just because I feel like that's kind of a guy who's kind of quiet and he's kind of not I think some of the guys I think like a Correa or a Stroman might be ones that wait a little bit longer. Some more outspoken players who I think they're just their attitude's a little bit different. But we'll see what happens. I think it'll be exciting to see what what some of these guys end up doing and when they sign because I think there's just so many players this year and that could happen at any moment with a lot of them. So
Yeah, you really can at any time. But let's go ahead and move on to to the joke you made a little bit earlier, and that's about the New York Mets general manager job and having been turned down by pretty much everyone. I think at this point, I mean, I think even we turned them down when we weren't even given an offer. We still pulled our name from the running from it, but the New York Mets ended up hiring former Los Angeles Angels manager general manager Billy Epler as their new GM.
yeah, so Billy Epler started off as the assistant GM of the New York Yankees from 2012 to 2014. Then he became the GM of the Los Angeles Angels in 2015. And this is a guy that he was a scout for a long time, worked with the Rockies, um, and he obviously worked with the Yankees, worked in Tampa for a little while. All right, sorry, he worked in Tampa for the Yankees, um, and he's made some pretty good signings in his career, um, but you know some of the signings he's made were were not they were high profile, but just not great. Here's a list of players that they signed while he was scouting professional players, for potential free agent contracts and stuff. This is the list: Bartolo Colon, who I don't think was all that impressive with the Yankees. Eric Chavez, not the same thing. Russell Martin, who I think had his worst seasons with the Yankees. Andrew Jones, who was definitely not the same player that he had been before due to injury. When he got there, Freddie Garcia never was the same. I mean, he is not did not have a great reputation, or he might have had a good reputation. He did not have a great resume there. And then he went to with the Angels. I mean, they've really struggled since he's been there. I mean, um, they just really haven't done all that well. Now, they did obviously sign Mike Trout to the long extension while he was there. And they brought in Shohei Ohtani while he was there as well, which a couple pretty good ones. But at the same time, they made sign Justin Upton to a big contract, and Anthony Rendon got that huge contract, which so far has been a pretty much a disaster. It might change, and they also made the Andrelton Simmons trade while he was there. So, um, and he got fired from the Angels in 2020. I don't especially see where this guy's resume has been all that impressive. He might be real well respected. I don't want to hate on somebody, and it might be a better fit with the Mets. But I don't especially think that he's been all that impressive in his career as a you know a, as a general manager or anything. And he seems like a major fallback plan for just to get somebody with some experience that the Mets have not even they've been turned down by tons of people so far. So um, it sounds like he's got an idea of a couple candidates for the opening of manager, which Luis Rojas was let go not long ago, and sounds like his two main people that they focused in on are Brad Ausmus and Buck Showalter, which very interesting. Buck Showalter hadn't managed in a while. Um, seems a little bit more of like a Tony La Russa type hire than anything else. But I mean, I think Buck Showalter does have a little bit better reputation with players today, and than La Russa does, and maybe just a little bit different. But and then Brad Ausmus, was let go by the um, by the Angels, or which was kind of brought on more by the management than it was by him. So it'll be interesting to see what's going on. I'm not. If I was a Mets fan, I would definitely give the guy the benefit of the doubt and say that there's a lot of different variables to being a GM. Um, in baseball, I mean, you got different owners to deal with. You got different, different circumstances. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and we've seen guys that failed one place be very successful in other places. But I don't know if I would be all that excited about somebody who, came into a situation with the best player in baseball and, possibly the best player in baseball since Barry Bonds on your team, plus a good group of young core players with him. That was coming off a season in which they, were in the, coming off a couple seasons in which they were in the playoffs, and not just in the playoffs, but really contending in the playoffs, and um, you know, and then go and then have the seasons that they've had, even with the probably the best player of the last decade in baseball on your team. I mean, I think that's kind of, I don't think that's a great sign for the Mets, but we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, another name that you didn't mention that they had kind of been mentioned in their their possible manager search was also Eric Chavez, and like you said, he had signed him with the Yankees, and actually when he started developing his own analytics department, he brought in Eric Chavez as a special assistant to the Angels after he was working with the Yankees. So he does have a good reputation with Eric Chavez and a good understanding of who he is. So that could be another name. Him and Osmus are kind of the two front runners, I would think, even over Showalter, just because of the connection with Epler, and maybe even Osmus because he has some history of managing at least. But it it's also going to be really hard for Epler coming into this situation right now because it seems like the Mets are just a fire, a dumpster fire at this moment. Steve Cohen's been pretty outspoken. Players have been pretty outspoken about a lot of things, and then coming into the middle of an off season that you might have a work stoppage. It's like it just doesn't seem like it's a great situation to jump into this year. And being, I think he was probably the 20th different option that they had. I mean, it seemed like everyone under the sun kind of had turned down the even opportunity to interview for the Mets just because they knew it was going to be, this big dumpster fire. He did bring in some talent when he was in Anaheim. He did have Mike Trout, but then he did bring in Shohei Ohtani. He did bring in Anthony Rendon, which at the time we thought was a really good signing. He Andrelton Simmons was a decent player. He didn't have the greatest offensive thing, but he's a great defensive shortstop. Justin Upton, he signed him to that big extension, but he played relatively well before that. I think his big pit downfall had been basically just not the development of pitching. He just never was able to develop pitching, and he was never able to really bring in many free agent starters. To make that a destination spot in a place like Anaheim where, it's close to LA and it should be, one of the destination spots. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do with the Mets in that area, who are pretty well, equipped offensively. They still do have, some good offensive firepower, but their rotation is a question mark now. DeGrom is DeGrom, but he started battling injuries this year. He's also starting to, he's in his 30s, maybe not as many innings on the arm, but he's still starting to get it up into his middle 30s. Syndergaard, it seems like he wanted to get out of there. You have Stroman, who's a free agent at this point. You're going to have Carlos Carrasco and Taijuan Walker, but those guys really seem to struggle. Carrasco all year. Taijuan started the year pretty decent, but started to struggle after that. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Epler can do, not just this offseason, because I'm kind of give him a wash this offseason because of it coming in already. I mean, we're already, a week into the offseason really, but he's not really having time to do anything, to build the relationship with the players. He's got to try to jump in. He's been working as an agent this past year anyways. So maybe he has a little bit of an understanding of what the market kind of looks like anyways, but with the potential work stoppage and then the way that the whole, aura seems around the Mets right now, I think it's really going to pick up to what he can do, next offseason. Starting from next offseason or maybe even in the middle of the season at the deadline and seeing what direction he takes this team in. And maybe that's even going to be a start with which kind of a manager he hires. If he hires a guy like a Brad Osmus or an Eric Chavez, maybe that's more of a slow play. And maybe get those guys where if you get a guy like Buck Showalter, he's going to want to compete, right now. And I'm not sure the Mets are really set up at this moment with Epler coming in right now to be a full-on competitor.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that would worry me if I was the Mets is that you had the aura around them, like you said, is awful, and I mean it. I don't think people realize how. I mean, you've got the owner, the Mets' own Twitter, calling out his players, calling them trash, and asking how you possibly have as horrible of approaches they have. I mean that if I was a player, to me, I would not even want to go near that team. Like it just seems like a I mean, it just seems like an absolute dumpster fire. And then you talk about, they get turned down a bunch. Then Sandy Alderson has this press conference where he's saying, "Oh, the reason they were getting turned down is because people don't want to work in the city of New York because there's pressure." It's like, I mean, I don't. I mean, I really think I really think the Mets are in trouble. Um, when it comes to, I just I have a hard time believing the Mets are going to get the type of people in there that can establish a winning culture with this group. Now, maybe they do. They've got talent. I mean, you're sitting there. You got Francisco Lindor. You've got, Jacob DeGrom, who's probably the best pitcher in the game when he's healthy. I mean, you've got a lot of good players there. I mean, Brandon Nemo's a pretty nice piece.
Pete
You maybe
Alonso.
Pete Alonso. You might get a nice bounce back from like a Jeff McNeil maybe, or JD Davis, or somebody who spent part of the year injured and never got to 100%. So there's pieces to like there, but at the same time, you're in a situation in New York where, I mean, it could be pretty rough there, and I think that they're going to have to work really hard to get the right type of players in there to really help that franchise right now. So um, I don't think that the ownership is helping very much, other than just increasing payrolls helped for sure. But other than that, I don't really think they've done too much good for them. And I don't think that the previous GM or president or whatever Sandy Alderson's title is, I don't think that he's really done all that much to help them. And I don't know if Billy Epler is somebody that can come in and really change things too much. He might be able to do some good things for them and help them, but I don't know if he's really the guy that's going to move the needle for them. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. And I kind of disagree. I think this offseason's important because you got a lot of money having come off the books. I mean, Conforto's gone. You got the Baez is gone. Um, you talked about Stroman's gone. Syndergaard's gone. That's a lot of money tied up in those guys through arbitration that you now have that money to spend on top of a potential increase in the payroll that they might have. I don't know if that's the case for New York, but for the Mets, but I think that that's an important thing to look at as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of money off the books, and they need to spend it on somebody because I mean, you've got the defending champs in the division. You've got a team that's got some good pieces, including the possible NL MVP on their team in there. You've got a team that's got probably one of the better rotations in baseball, and a lot of young pieces to maybe add to their big league uh, team from the pool of young prospects and stuff in Miami. I mean, yeah, the Mets are in a situation where they really need to do something this offseason to keep pace. So it'll be interesting to see, and I think it's a big deal for them to have a good offseason. So
Yeah, it might be a big deal for them to have a good offseason, especially knowing the type of person which we've seen this year of what Steve Cohen is, and how he wants to win at all times. I just don't know how much this offseason is already going to have been affected and put Epler behind the eight ball. Because it's already in the middle of the off season, that most people hire their general managers before the World Series or right around the World Series ending so they can get basically the full reign of the off season, talk to their own free agents, their own players, free agents, and then go into the market with the full understanding of what those players are looking for and what they're not. I mean, you just signed Epler yesterday and then Syndergaard's already off the market. It seems like Stroman's already kind of signaling that he might be gone as well. And then with the potential work stoppage coming up in 2 weeks, I mean, how much time is Epler going to have to really get in with these free agents and work on trying to get these deals done? With just being hired yesterday, or something. It's just I don't know quite how much he's going to be able to do in that time, and if that stoppage happens, you know, it's going to affect this offseason big time, even more for the Mets than it will for many other teams because they were so late to the party of hiring their general manager.
Yeah.
But
One thing I will say about it too, with this situation is that I think that Sandy Alderson's contributions to their offseason are are already are going to be large. I think that he's really in charge right now, and Billy Epler is going to take a little bit of time get to learn the reins and everything of it. But I really think that I don't know how much this offseason will be on Epler. I think Sandy Alderson will have a lot to do with what happens in this offseason and who they sign and
well, yeah,
what moves they make. So I think that they've got a plan that they're going to have Epler try to put in place already. I think it's
well,
kind of the deal there.
that's why I said I think his, the real start for him is next offseason. Alderson could be doing this stuff, but I think the real start for Epler is going to be which next offseason, when he has the full year into the job and what he can do, where this one will be more of what Alderson does. So, anyways,
Yeah.
let's go ahead and talk about the rookie of the year and the manager of the year awards that have been announced already, and then we'll hit on our Cy Young and our MVP picks. But the rookie of the year voting went pretty much how I expected it to go, and that was with Randy Arozarena winning the rookie of the year on the American League side, and then Jonathan India winning it on the National League side.
Yeah, so no surprises there. I thought there was an outside chance you could maybe see the AL one go to Franco because of all the prospect hype he had, but it ended up just being the fact that over the season he didn't play as many games as Rosarina, who had a good season. Um, regardless of, I mean, I think Franco was better when he played, but I think Rosarina had a good enough season to where that volume of having the whole season really helped. And then you look at Jonathan India as a guy who, I mean, he was very good for the Reds. Really kind of won it off of by default. Trevor Rogers missed a little bit of time, although he definitely had an argument for it. Um, so I think I mean it went kind of as expected for sure.
Yeah, and I just expected a Rosarena to be able to win it because Franco didn't have as much time. Like I had said in last week's episode, if Franco had come up maybe a month sooner, he wins this award hands down. I mean, he had the better stats, but he didn't have how long the stats were on there. Um, and India, I mean, I think he deserved it all the way. I think he ended up getting like 29 of the 31st place votes, anyways. So he had a really great season, and no dig at Trevor Rogers, but I just think India was just that much better than everyone else that was in contention for the Rookie of the Year. So. Uh, those were the awards we kind of, or the Rookie of the Year, we kind of expected it to kind of go that way. You could have flipped a coin between a Rosarena and Franco, but just the having them more time this year, I think just lended a Rosarena's hand a little bit. But let's look at the Manager of the Years, where we had Gabe Kapler win it for the San Francisco Giants in the National League, and Kevin Cash of the Tampa Bay Rays win it in the American League.
Yeah, so I mean, first off, Gabe Kapler was fully expected. I think that he was obviously the pick in the National League. I mean, um, the Giants went from a team that was really not expected to do too much, and the management style of Gabe Kapler really lends to the manager having a lot more influence on games by the fact that he's picking and choosing his his spots and doing a lot of tactical stuff that shows up during on game days during games. I think that was really important in that, and the fact that um, I think there's a lot more of management that goes on behind the scenes that is not really seen by people in the media voting for manager of the year type stuff. So I think the award's not super typically accurate as who the real best manager was. But I think that it was. I think that Gabe Kapler should have gotten a lot of credit, and he did. And then in the American League, I thought Kevin Cash was really interesting. I was real surprised at what service from Seattle. And I was really surprised that Alex Cora wasn't a finalist for the award. After year one, his last time he was there, it was a World Series championship. Then they had the 1 year he wasn't there; they were completely awful, and then he comes back and they're good again. type thing for Alex Cora. So, um, I thought that was interesting that he wasn't a finalist. But I mean, Kevin Cash, I'm gonna defend it, but real quick, a lot of people are really trashing giving it to him, but this is a Rays team that lost their two best pitchers from last year. They lost Charlie Morton. They lost Blake Snell. Um, then they also lost some pieces in their lineup from last year and Hunter Renfroe. Um, they he was one of their better bats last year. They lost him. They lost a couple other guys who are a little more under the radar, but they still kind of turned it into the best season they've ever had at 100 wins. And obviously, you talk about the postseason and they didn't make it as far, but this is a regular season awards. So, they took a roster that was probably an 80 win roster to 100 wins. So, um, and the fact that they did, win their division, which was probably the toughest division in baseball this year. Um, Obviously, the Mariners really overperformed, but they were also in a weaker division. Their competition really, I mean, the Astros are really good, but the A's are, just okay, and the Rangers not very good. So, um, their competition wasn't quite what the AL East is. With the four teams that won 90 games. So I think I think it was a very good. I think it was very good. It very well could have given it to Scott Service, but I mean, and it maybe should have, but I don't want to trash the giving it to Kevin Cash. So
Yeah, I think the National League one with Gabe Kapler, that was pretty much expected. Like you said, he did a great job, and he's kind of revitalized himself after his bad stint in Philadelphia, and even getting hired by San Francisco. There was a lot of bad rap to that. And then last in the 2020 season, they kind of underperformed, and people were like, "Well, it's just kind of typical Kapler a little bit." And then this year, when nobody even thought they had a chance, and now that they had the best season, the best team in baseball, he's kind of showing himself as the manager that many teams thought he was. I mean, he was the other finalist for the Dodgers manager job when they hired Dave Roberts. And then there was strong talk about him being the guy there, and that he was going to be a star manager. Then he goes to Philadelphia, struggles, and then now with the Giants, he's starting to revitalize that. So really good season for Kapler, and I think that was pretty much expected that he would win this award. Kevin Cash winning it, I wasn't a big fan of him winning it. He should have been a finalist. But like you said, I Cora and Scott Service, they should have been 1 and 2 in my opinion. Um, you know, even with trading Blake Snell and losing Charlie Morton, and I mean, even you didn't even mention losing Glass now in the middle of the season, who was having a great season at the time.
yeah, for sure.
You know, they still had a really good. They still had a lot of the players that had done really well for them. You still had a Brandon Lau. You still had you had Randy Rosarena, who went on that big run and helped lead them to the World Series the year before. They still had Austin Meadows, who even though he struggled, they still had him. Mike Zunino's been really good. You had the Wander Franco getting called up
Yeah,
as a rookie.
you gotta remember about Wander Franco though. They had Willie Adames. They traded him away.
I understand,
And
but
and then you kind of had I get your point about that, but you also had 2 months of subpar shortstop production between the trade of Adames and the call up of Franco. So it's almost like losing a key player for 2 months, if that makes sense.
no, I mean it doesn't really matter. I mean, we know at this point Kevin Cash is a good manager. I mean, he led them to the damn World Series the year before, and really, I mean, they had a lot of the same people still there, like trading Willie Adames, who even though he had good moments there, he was still a good player, especially on the road. I mean, it was just at home where he was really awful. But then you're bringing in a guy who everyone's comparing to be the next Mike Trout. I mean, yeah, that's a really good player that you added to your roster. You still traded for Nelson Cruz and brought that into your lineup. Like, it's not like, he was working with a roster that, with the Seattle Mariners, who nobody expected to be a good team. Like, everyone kind of assumed, like, okay, the Rays are still going to be a good team even though they've traded these people. Like, they always find a way to do that. You look at the Mariners, who had, like, they're trying to cast off Kyle Seager. You don't know what Mitch Haniger is going to get. You're not as high on a guy like J.P. Crawford. Ty France was there. Like, who knew Ty France was going to be, an above average player? Who knew Seager was going to hit over 30 home runs again? Who knew Mitch Haniger was going to have the year he had? And then still bringing up a guy like Kellenick, who struggled a little bit, but then found his way. And that younger pitching staff, like I think the job that Scott Service did this year, blows what Kevin Cash did out of the water, in my opinion. And he should have been the manager of the year. And Cora should get a lot of talk as well. And he should have definitely been in there over Dusty Baker. And you could have argued if Cora or Kevin Cash, who should have been second and who should have been third to Service. But, you know, with not having a healthy Chris Sale, with, the questions around the rotation, you had guys like Nick Pavetta and Garrett Richards in that rotation for, a good amount of the season. Although you did get, Nathan Eovaldi and Eduardo Rodriguez had good years. But the horrible defense they had, the year JD Martinez kind of started to struggle at the beginning of the year and found it more later on. I just think Cora did a really good job managing this year between that pitching staff and getting the most out of what those guys can do and handling that the bad defensive team that they were, and being able to get, good offensive production, even though we know guys like a Devers and a Xander Bogaerts and a, JD Martinez are great hitters. He still did a really good job. And you could battle which one was second and which one's third. But he should have definitely been a finalist over, a guy like Dusty Baker. But I just think, in my opinion, Scott Service should have been the manager of the year after the job that, he did. I mean, people were talking about that team being a fourth place team coming into the year. And, and they went on to, fight for a wild card spot right all the way up to the end, to, the last day of the season with the Yankees and the Red Sox.
Yeah, definitely interesting stuff. Real quick before we finish this one up, we do have the other two and the big awards. The next 2 days announced. I think the Cy Young is actually announced tonight, right?
No, Cy Young's tomorrow.
Tomorrow night. Cy Young's tomorrow night. MVP would be on Thursday night. So the Cy Young, you've got the National League. The finalists are Corbin Burns, Zach Wheeler, and I'm drawing a blank on the other one.
Max Scherzer.
So, um, and then the American League, you have finalists Robbie Ray, Garrett Cole, and Lance Lynn. So, in my opinion, I think Corbin Burns will win the National League in a very tight race with Zach Wheeler, and I think that Robbie Ray is going to win the American League one.
Yeah, I think Robbie Ray is the hands down in the American League. Lance Lynn being in there, I mean, there's really no consideration to him. He's just, somebody has to be in there at third. Garrett Cole had a good season, but Robbie Ray's I think the runaway winner here. And in the National League, I mean, you could really make a case for any one of them, of the three. I do think that Burns will get it in the long run. But I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if, somebody said Zach Wheeler won it tomorrow, or if Zach or Max Scherzer wins it tomorrow. Like, I don't think either any of these three really separated themselves as the guy. But I would say, if you had to look at one, I would say Burns has the edge just over them. And Wheeler and Scherzer, I think you can flip flop either one of those in second or third. They both had really good seasons. Wheeler kind of struggled a little bit more down the stretch, where Scherzer, once he got to LA, went on a big run to kind of bring himself back into the conversation. But Burns was just the most consistent all year long and had the record, start to the season. And then, he didn't fall off nearly as much as a guy like Wheeler did, or have as bad to the start of the season as a guy like Scherzer did. So I think Burns will win the National League one pretty easily.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I will say that I think that Burns and Wheeler are pretty far ahead of Scherzer, just because you look at Scherzer's contribution from when he was at LA was Cy Young worthy, but when he was in Washington, he wasn't quite as good as he was in LA, and he wasn't as good as the other guys. Plus, I mean, if you talk about a guy with under 180 winnings winning the Cy Young, they better do what Corbin Burnes did this year and have a historic season when it comes to the rate stats. So, it's going to be interesting to see who wins this one because you got Zach Wheeler, who's kind of the typical Cy Young winner with the high innings count, the low ERA, did a great job preventing runs, but the 213 innings. You got Corbin Burnes, who by rates was by far the best pitcher in baseball this year, but he only pitched 167 innings. So it's going to be interesting to see what some of the voters look at with this. But and then the American League, I think Robbie Ray's going to win it pretty easily, even though. I mean, you talk about some of the analytics community and the sabermetric community is not going to love that. I think he's going to win it pretty easily. I mean, he pitched a lot of innings and didn't give up as many runs as everyone else, so I think that's going to put him over the top. But you look, other way around, MVP. We have in the National League, we have Bryce Harper, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Juan Soto as our finalists. And in the American League, we have Shohei Ohtani, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and Marcus Semien as finalists.
Yeah, and then in the American League, I mean, I think it's going to be pretty easily be Shohei Ohtani. There was a good portion of the year where it was Vlad versus Ohtani. I just think that Ohtani's going to win it because of his contributions on both sides of the baseball. Being able to pitch the way he pitched this year was was really big for him. I mean, even if he had come in and been a guy with like a 4 ERA, 4.5 ERA, we wouldn't be talking, about him winning the MVP. But he was a good rotation arm. I think he had a middle 3 ERA, and then what he was able to do offensively, the batting average isn't as high as a guy like Vlad's, but just the impact he had overall, just outweighs what Vladimir Guerrero did. And not to take away from Marcus Semien, who's, I think a distant third to Vlad or Ohtani, but Semien had a really great year as well. And I think in pretty much almost any other year, he'd be, right in strong contention to win the award. But he's probably going to finish third this year. And looking over at the National League, there's going to be the battle between Harper and Soto. Tatis is clearly going to be third just because he, had the 2 shoulder injuries and didn't play the amount of games. If he had played a full season, he's probably your MVP. But I think easily it's going to be Bryce Harper over Juan Soto. There'll be a conversation, but to me, Harper had the better season overall, and I just think that he's going to get that award.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. I think in the National League, for first off, I don't think I can remember a time where none of the finalists for MVP made the playoffs in a season. That was interesting, but
Yeah.
um, I think Bryce Harper, when you compare him to Juan Soto, I think the power stands out. Both of them had 430 plus on base percentages. Soto's was a tiny bit higher, and both had, high batting averages, which a lot of the community of writers and stuff that vote on this, are really big on. So, Soto had a slight edge there, but I mean, Harper had a lot more power this year. He only hit 6 more home runs, which is a pretty good bit, but not a huge amount. But his slugging percentage, at 615 was much higher than Soto's 534, and that can be shown in the WRC plus at 170 for Harper, which led the majors. And defensively, both players are fairly similar. Harper, just I mean, and both players played. Harper played 10 fewer games, or he probably would be, a little bit more, probably up over 7 wins above replacement if he had played, full, if he had played 10 more games. So, I look at Tatis as a guy who, 130 games for him, so big drop off. And I think a lot of Tatis's defensive struggles are going to hurt him some too. He's a great hitter, but he's really struggled defensively at shortstop this year. So, and you look at it, I don't really understand why Trey Turner wasn't a finalist over Tatis, but I definitely felt like he could have been up there, especially with his contributions on the base paths, in addition to being a 28 homer guy for a shortstop who played good defense at shortstop and won the batting title. So, I thought Trey Turner probably should have been up there, but either way, the American League, I mean, I think that I agree. Shohei Ohtani is going to win it, and he probably should. He struggled a little bit on the mound to start the season when it came to, having his control being off, but he really started to kind of find his control coming off his injuries at the end of the season. And he was spectacular on the mound by the end of the year. He ended up with 3 WAR on the mound to go on top of his 5.1 WAR as a hitter, which would put him up over 8, which is higher than anybody else by over a win this year in the entire big leagues. So I definitely like what Shohei Ohtani did at the plate. 46 home runs, believe led the majors, or second in the majors behind Guerrero. Guerrero had a great breakout year, but his positional value at first base is a little bit of a struggle. It's not like he was playing a premium position. He was probably the best hitter out of the AL contenders. Definitely the best hitter by pretty good margin, I think, out of the AL contenders. And I think I just think that Ohtani with his contributions to the mound as well was really solid. And Marcus Semien was great offensively and defensively, but he's a little bit of a step behind, definitely behind Ohtani and probably behind Guerrero as well. So very good races here. I mean, like I say, think Bryce Harper wins. Um, and one other thing about Bryce Harper is that his team was at least in the stretch run in the race, and he's really the only reason they were even in it till the end. So that probably helps him some too. Where like a Juan Soto is playing on an absolutely horrible team, down the stretch this year. So um, that probably helps Harper for sure. But we'll see what happens. Definitely gonna be interesting to see who wins these awards.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see. You know, I think we agreed on all 4 awards, that are going to be, announced in the next couple days. But, you know, we're kind of leading up to the award season and then getting this off season seems to be moving along pretty quickly. Hopefully that stays up for the next couple weeks and then they can figure out what, the CBA negotiations, and hopefully we don't have a stoppage, but, it seems like we're going to have a pretty active off season before that happens. So, give us a lot to talk about. I know this is going to be a little bit of a longer episode, but thank you guys for sticking with us throughout this one. And, we'll go ahead and catch you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.